Cool. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to Chattering with Nicholas Events. In a few moments, I'm going to be introducing Andrew Robinson. Before I do, I just wanted to thank everybody who subscribed to the YouTube channel. That's very good of you. Thank you very much indeed. And I also wanted to give a shout out to the Soska Sisters blood drive and the films that are being shared. One in particular that's come out recently, and that's Saviour by my mate Paddy Murphy and the guys at the Celtic Badger. They've just released Saviour. They're a huge influence on me, and I worked with them on a couple of short films last year, and more of that anon. But my short film, Kirby a Hero, is going to be coming out in the next couple of weeks, and I just wanted to share very briefly. That is the present to everybody. That is the let me just click on that and just that is the I am screen sharing. Present to everybody. So that's the poster. And that is the style of the short film. It's very much a comic book. So that, as I say, Kirby a Hero will be coming out in the next week or so. So keep an eye out for that. But let me introduce Andrew. Hi, Andrew.
Yeah, good day to you all. I'm in the middle of morning and so forth. I thought your poster, before I saw the poster and the writing, I thought the title of your film was Curb Your Hero, as in curb your dog, which I thought that's quite wonderful. I had a great visual on that one.
Well, thank you very much. That sounds like a really interesting idea. Cool. All right. Well, so thank you for joining me. And we had a couple of questions from that hung over from last week, which I'd like to start with.
And first of all, let me apologize for those of you who came last week and there was a no-show because of, my Luddite ways. I technologically, I am not as smart as, say, some of the characters I've played.
People understand entirely. Listen, it happens on the BBC. During the week, I was, listening to some of the live broadcasts, and they have difficulty getting people
right
just on the phone, let alone trying to set up cameras and TVs and visuals as well. Right. So it's no problem. So one of the questions that we had from last week was from Danny, and he wanted to know what it was like working on Drowning Pool and what your memories are of Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward.
That's quite amazing. I mean, Drowning. I mean, this may be. I don't know what's in the water, because for years and years, ever since I made Drowning Pool, I mean, back in somewhere in the mid-70s, I think, no one has ever brought up that film. And then in the last several months, there have been some questions about it. The thing about Drowning Pool that I remember the most was on the role as written when I read the script was an amazing role. And then they started rewriting, and the role dwindled down to a precious few, so to speak. Still, it was a lot of fun because I actually did work a lot on it, although a lot of never got to the screen. And my favorite memory of working with Paul Newman was one night we did a couple of weeks of night shooting, and night shooting is grueling, especially if you do several weeks where you work from when the sun goes down to when the sun comes up. So my day anyway is completely reversed. And so we were somewhere north of Los Angeles. I don't think it was Louisiana. We shot a lot of the film in Louisiana, but I think this night shooting was in Los Angeles. And Paul Newman and I were in a car together, and he pulled out a flask of some really good booze, whatever it was. And we proceeded to get drunk, and so then of course, I being a young actor, I started asking him all kinds of questions. And at one point, I asked him a question about something I really shouldn't have asked. It was a rumor about he and this actress, and and that opened up a whole can of fish. And I think he was he stayed pissed off at me for the rest of the shoot after that. But I liked him a lot. He was, and the movie was, it wasn't a great movie, but it was a lot of fun.
I've only ever seen it once. I think I remember it was broadcast on TV probably at the end of the 70s or the early 80s. And just remember that room filling with water. And
yes, right.
There's no sequences.
But Joanne, I didn't work with Joanne Woodward in it. Was she in it? I guess she was in it, yeah, because I met her, but I don't know. I can't remember. I'm old.
It's 40 years ago now. Tell me.
Yes, right. But it was great. Louisiana, shooting in Louisiana was a lot of fun. Very spooky.
Oh yeah, no, I'm sure. There's not a part of the world I've really properly visited. Very interesting. Okay, and this is a question from Kim Lehman. What was your favorite scene? Actually, there's two parts to the question. What was your favorite scene that you did in Hellraiser? And what is your favorite Clive Barker novel?
No, the favorite scene is really easy. It's when, in a sense, Frank becomes Larry, or Larry becomes Frank, whatever you want to call it. And I come down the stairs, sort of like, adjusting the skin that I've just, and the whole come to daddy and the so much for the cat and mouse shit. I mean, that was pure delights. After playing this poor good guy who's just, used and abused by the world and by Claire Higgins, to suddenly turn into the guy who's doing the using and abusing. So that was a lot of fun.
That was a lot of. Was that?
Go ahead. What?
You were saying, it was a lot of fun to play. Did you, or do you get cast as that more gentle side of yourself?
Well, now, I mean, I haven't done any film in a long time, and now that you get to a certain age, I mean, people assume that you become defanged. I would love to play those, still play those characters. I think you can have really wicked, evil old men. But no, now it's like, I'm doing more stage, and now I play Prospero and those people, the wise old magicians and whatever. That's the good stuff. Yeah. But I'm to be quite honest with you, Nick, I hate really playing good guys. Not hate, but I find good guys are kind of boring.
They really are.
I like the people with the edges and who are leaning half into the darkness and so forth.
Right.
But the other part of the question is, my favorite. The favorite writing of Clive's for me is his books of blood. I adore those stories. And as a matter of fact, I reread, because of that, you told me that someone had asked this question, Nick. So I pulled out the book and I went to this one story called Madonna that I think is an amazing story. As a matter of fact, I wanted to make a film of it. But, making a film is, who knows about that stuff. Anyway.
I think you're probably the third person I've ever spoken to who wants to film Madonna.
Are you kidding?
No,
no, you wouldn't be. No, I can understand it because it's very. I mean, that whole subterranean bath area with all of those rooms, and then the visuals of that thing. And, anyway, yeah.
It's a very good comic. I'm sure they've done it as a comic. I've got an image of comic strip because they did the whole load of Clive's books of blood as comics in a series called Tapping the Vein. Come to think of it, so they did quite a lot of comic book adaptations of Clive stories.
Well, it would so lend itself to that kind of illustrative form. Yeah.
And interest. And Books of Blood, amazing. I remember when I first started writing short stories, I thought, okay, well, how do I write short stories? I know, I'll just read Clive's, because he's just the master at using language.
He is an extraordinary writer. He really is. When I got hired to do Hellraiser, I didn't know Clive. I met this guy, and he seemed like this, angelic sort of person from Liverpool, and we met him with Christopher Figg, who, by the way, I was watching just last night. I was watching David Lean's film Passage to India, and in the credits at the end, Chris Figg, who was the producer of Hellraiser, was an assistant director, and I had forgotten that he had worked with David Lean. Anyway, so when I met these guys, I had no idea who he was, and then I read his stories, and I thought, oh my God, this guy he's major.
Yeah. It is, and also, kind of one of the sweetest, nicest people I've ever met. Absolutely. As well. Really terribly, terribly generous and encouraging. Okay, so the other question that we had was, speaking of Hellraiser, what was it like filming Hellraiser? We've talked about your favorite scene, but did you have any sense of just how big Hellraiser was going to become?
No, I mean, but you never do. You never know these things. You get hired. You're an actor. You get hired for a job. You're grateful to be hired for a job. You hope the check clears the bank, and that the people are not assholes that you're working with, and then. And immediately, it was the greatest group of people, wonderful, and the technicians were superb. This house in North London where we shot was really this funky, weird place. Was perfect for the film. We were shooting at Cricklewood, which is it was sort of like going back in time, I expect to see the ghosts of, the Ealing brothers, whatever. I mean, all, and then working with Clive and his openness, because it was his first film really directing, and he was truly, truly open to ideas and was curious as to how we were going to play it, which is, I wish more directors were like that. You let actors act. What an odd thought. Yeah. I mean, but it was like, and then working with somebody like Claire Higgins, who's, given her, her track record and the kind of theater that, for instance, that she's done. She's a powerful woman and a beautiful woman.
Yeah.
And amazing, and had that. I mean, it was a perfect casting. Yeah. For me and Claire. I mean, here I am. You look at me, and Andy is like, oh, there's Sunny Andy, and and then there's Claire, who has that Black Irish thing that's going on with her. It was great, and I
have to say, I was terrified of her when we were making it.
Yeah.
I mean, we have no scenes, and I think I shared probably about 2 or 3 words with her during the entire filming process. And it wasn't until decades later when I got to meet her properly and she was just so funny and sweet and lovely. Absolutely. Gorgeous.
Yeah.
Right, really, really is. Okay, well, no doubt that maybe. Okay. Actually, all right. Well, we'll stick with that just for the next few minutes, because you got a subsequent question came in. What was it you mentioned kind of earlier on of playing the 2 characters? How did you approach? This is another question from Kim. What was it? How did you approach playing 2 characters in the same film? The brothers particularly.
Yeah. Well, it's for an actor, it's an ideal situation. I mean, I don't want to get too technical because but when I teach, because I teach for several years now. I've run a conservatory program at the University of Southern California, actor training program, And one of the things I've discovered is what I call our dynamic, because all of us have a dynamic of light and dark. All of us, we try to be civilized human beings, and well, not all of us, most of us, and try to just function, with a certain amount of decency and I don't know. I mean, just solicitude and consideration for the other. But in all of us, there's a dark place. There's a place where we have secrets. There's a place where we hide things. There's a place where there is anger, where there's rage, where there's been abuse, and so forth. And for an actor, and this is important to me, because having spent a lot of time playing evil, nasty people, I mean, how do you get to that place? How do you find one's own nasty areas and so forth? And that's where acting becomes not so innocent. It's because you do have to go to those places. And I found that out when I did my very first film, which was the Dirty Harry film with Clint Eastwood, where I played a psychopathic killer. And that took me by surprise, because immediately I had to drop into the psychopathy. I mean, you can pretend, we do as children, but when you're an adult and you're in a situation like that, to pretend or indicate evil is kind of boring. It's really bad acting. So, for playing Larry and Frank, it's the same thing. I was playing Larry and kind of struggling with that character, because he was so genuinely nice that it's hard to find traction with a character who's genuinely nice. But that's who he was. He was kind of boring and milquetoasty and nice. So by the time I got to Frank, it was, oh man, now I can let it out.
There are two moments in the film which I think, Larry epitomized to me. Larry, it's the moment where he goes to hang the coat on the banister and he flicks the dust off the top.
I love that moment too. Yes.
Yeah. And then there's this other, we talk, he's a genuinely nice guy. But the moment where he's watching the boxing match,
right,
and catches and it's like, I always think about this, like, because there's this guilt that he's being caught, that there is something else going on within that character, and he's guilty.
God, I've forgotten about that totally. Right.
So that's what and
that's
love
Clive.
That performance.
That's the beauty of Clive's writing. That out of this kind of domestic, it's an odd sort of domestic situation. This guy married to this woman, and there's his daughter and the stepmother and the poor little Kirsty, and then in this place, and then out of this kind of domesticity comes this horror, and it's sort of like our subconsciousness again, that sort of little box where we put all our dark stuff in, all the the heavy stuff. Suddenly the box is opened and it just kind of seeps out, just the way like Frank seeps up out of the floorboards. I mean, it's fucking brilliant. It really is brilliant. And so to answer your previous question, no, I had no idea it would be this kind of cult thing. But then when I saw a screening of the film after we had done it in Los Angeles, I remember I had never seen anything like this in my life. It was so original, and I think that's why it remains. People like it to this day.
Yeah, it is a classic. And speaking of classics, I asked you to choose 3 films. You actually gave me 5. But
no. I could have given you maybe 10 or 20.
Yeah, easily. I'm sure.
Right.
But so one of the first one I'd like to talk over is The Seventh Seal, Ingmar Bergman's The Seventh Seal. And I have to, what I must say is, thank you so much for choosing these films, because I realized I'd never watched The Seventh Seal all the way through. I've not seen Seven Samurai, and I've not seen Eight and a Half, and I love all of them for very different reasons. And we'll come, but
And you hadn't seen them, Nick?
I hadn't. I'd
Oh my
seen
God.
bits. I'd not.
I'm so glad. Then I joggled your mind about
Oh
this.
God, yeah, absolutely. And I hadn't really, because I knew in fact, having not, even without seeing the movie, I knew about Death playing chess with the knight.
Yeah.
So much so that I used it when I was writing comics. I used it in one of the comics. It's just an iconic image. And we're talking about the days before internet, so it must have been in books and so on. When did you first see The Seventh Seal?
It was when it's when I went to college, and there was this art house, and I went to college, excuse me, in this school in New Hampshire, in northern New England.
Right.
And for this kind of small little college town in New Hampshire, which is a very kind of rural place, and at the time a very kind of right-wing place, there was this art house of all things, the Franklin. And so it was the one theater in town. So they didn't bring in, oh yeah, occasionally there would be the Rock Hudson Doris Day, bedroom comedy or something like that, or Attack at Fort Apache and that stuff, which was back in the 50s and the 60s are the equivalent to the blockbusters of today. But for the most part, they played Fellini, Bergman, Kurosawa. And for me, being this, I was really a kind of a country mouse, and this was like literally the eye hole into these worlds. All of these worlds, which were so extraordinary to me. I mean, the thing of today, for instance, I'm directing some of my MFA students in this play called The Serpent, which basically is an investigation into violence and murder. And so the playwright takes us back to the book of Genesis to try and figure out what are the roots of our violence and why we were kicked out of Eden, and Cain's slaying Abel for this at the first murder and so forth. And one of the images that I use in the play is the Dance of Death, which I steal directly from The Seventh Seal. And the Dance of Death, which is a medieval motif of skeletons linked together, but link inexorably into the agony of death and our fear of mortality. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that was opening, it was exploding my head. And something like, then the Seven Samurai, which an entirely different culture, an Asian culture, a Japanese medieval period, where you have these samurai who are, and they're all kind of disgraced samurai. They, because samurai who didn't have a master, they were just these ronin. They were these rogues, and just hanging around, offering their sword to whoever paid for, who needed a warrior and so forth. And then these seven samurai who get together to help a village, and they were just being paid with rice and food. And this actor called Toshiro Mifune, who's at first time I've seen it. If any of you who don't know who this actor Toshiro Mifune is, you see the Seventh Samurai, you see these samurai films that Kurosawa made. I mean, and as a young guy who secretly wanted to be an actor, to see this kind of bravado, this kind of courage, this beauty in the way he just showed himself, and I mean, it was fabulous. I mean, I could go on all day, but the thing is, Nick, okay, the movie, and I don't know why this is, because I know I've always been a rather weird person, but the movie that really turned my crank was Fellini's 8½, and 8½, which is it's about it's about the life of the spirit, that we go into show business and we want to be actors or directors or dancers or acrobats or whatever it is. And then it's, well, anyway, it's 8.5 is, I mean, I still would watch this. Again, from beginning to end.
I've kind of watched 8.5. It was really difficult to get hold of over here. And I thought I'd found it on DVD. And then I discovered that I got, because obviously it's filmed in Italian, it's Fellini, it's Italian. And the subtitles are in French. Now, I stopped studying French over 40 years, actually more than 40 years ago.
God, that's hard work. I mean,
yeah, there's hard work. But as I say to a mate of my Barbie, I actually do like watching foreign language films with subtitles turned off, because you just look at the screen and you can. Right. And you can look at the. It's really interesting with the 8.5, because the performances are so over the top. They are.
Absolutely.
They're grotesques. Some of the characters are real grotesques. But it's a very wide cinema scope screen that you've got in 8.5, and he fills every pixel of that image.
Oh. Totally. And the beauty. I mean, like Marcello Mastroianni. I mean, like it was like watching. It was, I don't know. It was like watching God act. I mean, the ease and the beauty, and the women who were so unbelievably beautiful. And listen. It's I mean, these are things that I actually, that's how I lost my innocence, was with these films. I couldn't be a country mouse anymore, and I couldn't hide my ambitions, to be an actor. I mean, I really had to step out there and and do it.
That's very interesting. It's always interesting to know how people overcome that movement from the dream to the actuality.
Oh boy.
That movement, it's like, well, I'd like to do something. I remember, in fact, one of my first drama teachers saying, if, liking what, wanting to do something isn't enough, you actually have to take action. She always summed it up by saying, if you didn't get it, or it didn't happen, you didn't want it enough. And I kind of get what she's saying. There's a difference between, I would like to play the piano. I would love to play it'd be really nice, cool to play it. I don't actually want to spend any time learning how to play the piano or practicing or doing all the skills or the scales.
No, he's a very wise teacher you had. It's absolutely right.
Yeah.
And it would be an acting teacher who would say that, because basically one of the things that is one of my mantras that I try to pass along to students is the job of an actor is to turn the image, whatever our imagination comes up with, into an action. And to get that process, which is easier said than done, is the process of an actor. We have this imagery, we have an imagination, and how do we bring those images into form, into action? And
so you've mentioned, how long have you been teaching now? How long have you been doing the
USC
course?
This is my last year. Come this May, I'm actually going back to acting.
Right.
I've missed it, but the last 14 years I've been, because they hired me to begin to create a conservatory program. And at first I thought, this is absurd. I know nothing about, creating a whole syllabus and a pedagogy for training. But it was one of the greatest jobs I've ever been given. And then on top of that, to be able to work with really young, ambitious, hungry, talented people has kept me young in one sense. Not as young as I'd like to be, but still, I'm grateful to all of them. Absolutely. But because the job was so overwhelming and demanding, and especially creating it, and then for years leading it and trying to nurture it and support it and keep it growing, there was very little time for me to do my acting.
Yeah.
So, and I've missed that, and that's why I want to go back to it.
Right. Well, we've had some questions come in whilst we were talking, and funnily enough, the last one, Matthew, I'll come back to your questions. This has come in from Derek up in Scotland. Hi, Derek. Andrew, is there any TV show or any films around now or coming out soon that you would love to be part of as an actor or director? I suppose, yeah. Is there any TV shows, or is there anything like you think, yeah, I'd really like to do that, or any particular films that you'd like to do?
Listen, I kept my hair for a long time. I grew my hair long, waiting for Game of Thrones to realize, wait, there's a guy who would be a wonderful warlock or a wizard or something, a dragon keeper or something like that. I was begging for this. Then I realized they only hire Brits and Irish people. I think what's his name who plays Tyrion is the only guy, the only American that I can discern.
It's filmed in Ireland. But
there's a bunch of, there's a lot of stuff like HBO. There's this one thing called, oh my God, Jeff Daniels series. I don't know if it's been released in the UK yet, but it's called Godless. And
I don't think I know it. No.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's a Western, and it's a wicked, it's a wicked, rough morality tale kind of Western where good and evil are very much working against each other. There's a bunch of stuff. Yeah. I think that's what I'm opening, now I can see my way into that, because I think there would be wonderful roles for old guys like me who could still sort of like give you the snake eye. We'll see. There's a lot of good stuff.
Well, you mentioned you've played Prospero recently. You played Oberon. And the other character whose name is Oberon, Theseus, in Midsummer Night's Dream. Is Shakespeare something that's dear to your heart?
Oh, very dear. If I could spend the rest of my life, Nick, playing Shakespeare, I'd be happier than a pig in you know what. I really would. It's like it's the master. It's the mountain to climb. It's the language. This language. It's you once. Because I forgot, and you have to drop into the language. You have to learn it and get it into your body. And because, Shakespeare, to be or not to be, and all that stuff. But when you get that language into your body and you start acting, you're performing, you're working with other people, and you're these characters, you're playing these characters. You realize you understand that language has such power and such magic that you can. They say that mastery is the ability to just drop into the flow and to the flow of things so that you forget yourself. And that's what happens to me with Shakespeare. After a certain point, I find a flow and I forget myself. And that's yeah.
Interesting. I have to say, the immediate part. Have you ever thought of doing Lear?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I have ex-students of mine who are actually campaigning to get a production of Lear together. I guess they didn't have enough of me yelling at them. They masochists that they are. But and oddly enough, I've started, just to keep my brain supple and flexible to a certain point, or that part of my brain that line learning can help, is I've started learning Lear, just to learn it. And somewhere in the back of my mind, hopefully there will be, hoping that there will be a production of it.
That's really, I like that. That's something I've.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a really, really good tip, isn't it? Just to learn,
just to learn stuff. I mean, it really does make a difference, honestly. And especially at my age, it's hard at the beginning, because you think, oh God, this is work, learning this stuff, because you don't have that powerful, short-term memory anymore. You have to work the work is turning short-term memory into long-term memory.
Right.
But it's worth it. I mean, it really is worth it.
Yeah. I'll have to pick up my volume of. Actually, yes, looking at Antony and Cleopatra is one of the.
Yeah. Pick up something that you love. Yeah.
Yeah. We studied it at school. It's always been one of my favorite plays. But or Macbeth. Come to think of it. Okay. So a question from I mentioned Matthew Batten. Hi, Matthew. Thank you. This is going back to Star Trek. You were. I always think of you that you were in more episodes of Deep Space Nine because Garak was such a strong central character. What prompted you to write a novel about the character Garak?
Because when I got hired to play Garak, because I knew nothing about Star Trek, and so I knew nothing about the various races of Star Trek. And when I got hired to play a Cardassian, I didn't know anything. I mean, how do you play an alien? I mean, what is that about? So and so for me, having kind of like, I write things. That helps me to kind of get to the heart of things, or to work out problems. And so what I did is I started writing a diary, as Garak, and as if this character Garak kept a diary, and then I would create the world in which he came from, and the schools and the people that he knew. And it started off with the relationship that I started off with when I was hired to do the series, which was Garak's relationship with Dr. Bashir, who Siddig played, and I was actually hired to be an irregular on the series simply because they needed someone to give Sid's character, Dr. Bashir, a storyline. So they created the character called Garak, who was this elderly spy who is posing as a tailor on this space station. And because Sid and I had really a wonderful chemistry between us. I mean, we love each other. I mean, we adored each other from the beginning. That translated, on film. And so basically that's how the character, I was able to do the number of episodes that I did. I think 40 episodes. But I lost my thought. Wherever I was, that's where I was.
You're talking about Garak, and it's really interesting. You just reminded me that.
Oh, the book. Oh, yeah. So out of this diary came the book, because I would read excerpts from the diary at the various conventions I would go to, so that I would talk more, so I had more to say than just about my makeup. And people, and I enjoyed it, and people enjoyed listening to it. And then this one guy came up to me and said, this should be a book, and I know somebody at Pocket Books and so forth. And so that's when it happened.
Ah, interesting. I very much like that process. You reminded me that once when I was playing in The Crucible, Arthur Miller's The Crucible, when I was at drama school, and I can't remember, it was a small part. He was only in for about 2 or 3 times, but I've always found it harder to do a small part just to get into it's harder to get into the character.
That's right.
But one of the ways I did it was just to write a letter in that character.
Yes.
You know, he's writing to the authorities to say what's going on in the town, etc. And obviously he believes in the witchcraft. He believes what's going on, etc. And I just remember, you know, that all I had to do when I was preparing each night before going on and doing the show was just to reread the letter. And I'm then back in
It drops you right into there. Yeah. Absolutely. And it's an old actor's tool. I mean, you know, to create some kind of biography for oneself.
Yeah. Very interesting. Okay, cool. A question from Kim Lehman again. Andrew, who is your favorite composer? Do you have a particular favorite composer, or particularly film? Ravel.
And there's a time when I really believed, and I really believe this because, again, I'm a strange man. There was a time Ravel so strikes a chord in me when I listen to his music that I thought maybe I'm Ravel reincarnated. Maybe that's Ravel was one of my past lives. But music does that to me. Music, you know, I mean, you know, some music I'll listen to it and I think, oh my God, it's like I'm hearing myself think and feel and sense the way it moves through me. I mean, somebody who was it, Walter Pater, who was a Renaissance historian, said that all art aspires to the condition of music, and I kind of believe that. And so so Ravel, hands down. But then there's also that's a composer. And then of course my passion is I love classical music, no question, but it's also jazz. There's a certain you know, area of jazz that again that just speaks to my heart and my spirit. And it's pretty much American jazz after World War II up through to maybe the early 60s. There were a number of wonderful great artists, usually American black jazzmen who just knocked me out.
I think I've never got jazz. You know, there are some bits, and it's like, funnily enough, working on the short film for the Suskas, when I was writing it, I thought, this has got to have a jazz score. I was hoping to work with a composer. In fact, I ended up by just researching music and downloading tracks and
right
from the YouTube royalty-free stuff. And it's just like, actually, I really want to listen to more jazz now, because particularly saxophone and piano.
Right.
In my mind, it's that kind of 1940s. I'm guessing 1940s is probably what I've got in my head.
Well, if you do, then you've got Lester Young, you've got Ben Webster. You know, in terms of the saxophone, of course, there's Charlie Parker. I'm thinking of that specific area before you get to Coltrane and the others. But those guys, I mean, they were. I'm reading this book by an Englishman.
Okay.
Jeff Dyer, and the book is called But Beautiful. And it's this man, Jeff Dyer, who is obviously, I mean, a great jazz aficionado, and he may be even a musician himself, but he's a writer. He's written and he writes beautifully. And this book is a meditation. And it's where he takes actual events of jazz artists' life, like Ben Webster or Chet Baker or the pianist. There's one. I'll think of it later. It doesn't make any difference. But he takes actual events that happen to these people's lives, these men's lives, and then he does this meditative, imaginative riff, like a jazz riff, like an improvisation, and it's beautiful, and his writing is beautiful. So anyone who's interested in that area, I highly recommend that book.
Right.
Jeff Dyer, and the book is called But Beautiful.
Jeff Dyer, But Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Any particular film scores that you like? You've mentioned jazz, but are there any particular film scores that you like?
You know, it's interesting. I never was aware of how extraordinary film music is or can be. And then I did this film, Dirty Harry, and I played this crazy man, the Scorpio killer. And Lalo Schifrin, who is much of his background is a jazz background. Lalo Schifrin wrote this score, and he wrote and part of the score, and which is what film composers do. He writes, you know, film composers write within the score. There is music, there are motifs for the characters, and the music that he wrote for my character, I'm convinced, was like 40% of my performance. That it enhanced my performance so much. And one day I was up in the mountains. I mean, outside of Los Angeles, literally out, you know, way up in the, because I love to hike in the mountains. And I was on this remote mountain trail, hiking along, and this other guy was coming towards me, and we stopped, and he stopped. Well, he was the one who stopped and looked at me, and he said, "Are you Andy Robinson?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "My name is Lalo Schifrin." He says, and he said, and then he told me, because I said, "Oh my God, your score, the music that you wrote, I mean, like my performance, he says, "No, you inspired me." When, you know, it was one of the greatest encounters I'd ever had in my life. It was quite wonderful.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to say that, you know, they mentioned I think I've probably mentioned on the show before, Christopher Young's score for Hellraiser.
That was beautiful score. Beautiful score.
You know, and Doug Bradley has said, you know, when he did the subsequent films, basically all he, you know, we talked about the letter earlier on, you put on the, if I want to be back, if I'm writing Hellraiser stuff, which I did recently, I wrote an origin story for the Chatterer. And again, I just put on Christopher's music. It just puts you right back in that world.
That almost overripe lushness. I mean, that you know, and it was wonderful.
Yeah. And I haven't seen Dirty Harry in years. I'm going to go back and watch it again.
Oh, it's worth it just for Lalo Schifrin's score. It really is.
He's done some. Yeah, I should be listening to an awful lot more. Actually, yeah, I want to go back and listen to an awful lot more film scores, because they are just very inspiring. Because I think the thing about when you listen to a film score, if you've not seen the film, it's still written kind of with a story in mind.
Right, that's exactly right.
Yeah. So
and you know, because it's Oscar season, so our local classical station here in Los Angeles is playing a lot of old film score music. And the film scores from those movies in the 30s and the 40s, and especially from those composers, Miklos Rocha and, oh God, I'm going to forget them, names. But there are a whole bunch of European composers that fled Nazi, you know, Germany and the whole thing, and came to you know, got work in the film industry with the big studios. And so you look at those old, you know, those films that, and I wish I could remember their names just simply to honor them. But the music is exquisite, beautiful music.
Yeah, it's quite extraordinary the way that it just. I have to be very careful as to what I listen to, because I'll just get so distracted. You know, if I'm trying to do something else, I will just wander off completely away from what.
Wander off, Nick. What the hell?
It doesn't help when you're trying to build a website. But I think, yeah, creatively, it's a great thing to do. Right. Just wander off and those things. Oh, that's an interesting question from my friend. I think this is Ashley who's asking this question, a gentleman called Ashley Thorpe. A question for Andrew. If you could play any role in any form of horror film from any era, what would it be?
I loved, so I so loved the early. It probably would be Dracula. I mean,
Ah.
because I didn't realize that until, oddly enough, there's this children's show called Sesame Street. Did they show Sesame Street at all?
Yeah.
And they have this character called the Count, and the Count, 1, 2, 3. And I used to watch the old Sesame Streets with my daughter when she was a little girl, and I realized, watching the Count, I realized how much I loved Count Dracula. Listen to the children of the night. I would love to play Count Dracula. Yeah. I mean, I appreciated Frankenstein, but that poor Boris Karloff. I mean, back in the day, he had to sleep in that makeup, which sounds like horrendous. He would be in that makeup all week because it took so long to get him into it, and he could only get out of it for the weekend. Can you imagine?
I've not heard that before.
Oh my God!
If
he had to film consecutive days, he couldn't get in and out of the makeup. He had to stay in it.
That's obscene. That's. I'm just going to stop whinging about being Chatterer and that.
No, we mustn't. What those guys went through.
Jesus.
And Lon Chaney, and also I love Lon Chaney's Wolfman. I once did an episode of what is that thing with the with the Mulder and
X-Files.
X-Files.
Yeah.
I once did an X-Files where I played this guy, Dr. Detweiler, the Wolfman, who would turn into a wolf. And it was a good episode, except they never gave me the morphing shot. Where, like even back in the day when you'd see Lon Chaney, and then you'd see him change, and then the hair would sprout, and then the fangs, and then the eyes, and then the chain. And I was so upset that they never gave me a morphing shot. Isn't that a great thing to get upset about? That's first world problems, eh?
Yeah.
The world is going to hell. Old Robinson's worried about not getting his fucking morphing shot.
with Simon Bamford and I did some mock trailers for mock for various reasons. We did, and I played a Wolfman. And my morphing shot was dropping down behind the chair and then putting the gloved hand over the top.
Low budget ingenuity. Okay. Right.
No, I understand that entirely.
Yeah.
That's another question from Matthew. Interesting. Speaking about playing roles, you released your autobiography a few years ago. Who would you like to play you in a film version?
Daniel Day-Lewis, of course. I won't settle for less.
Yeah.
He'll come out of retirement.
That seems to me like a very good call.
Please.
What we're coming towards the end of the show. No, we still got some time. We make that probably. Sorry, I've just spotted another thing. Yeah, to know. This is a film I don't know about at all. A film called Trancers 3.
And you don't want to know about Trancers 3, Nicholas.
Sorry, Raoul, who asked the question.
No, Raoul. It was like, it's that or Pumpkinhead 3. Those, I mean, and both of those films, they were young friends of mine who I met when they were USC film students, and they directed these. And so they asked me, and they were very kind to ask me to be in them, and that's fine. But it's, I mean, the one deathless line from Trancers 3 is when I'm, you know, trance, I think involved a drug or something. I would turn these people into something or others. And I would say to this, I said at one point to this beautiful young woman, trance for me, Gina, trance for me. I have no idea what happened when she started trancing. It's funny. It's funny. But it was good for laughs.
Yeah. What you've talked about being an actor and teaching acting. If there's, you know, if I said, is there a, and you've talked about method, the method you employ, what do you think's the best piece of advice you've ever received about acting?
You know, I've received a lot of really, you know, I think a lot of good advice. I think it wasn't so much the advice as when I was in drama school at Lambda, and Lambda at that time in the mid-60s had a revolutionary voice program that I still use, Kristen Linklater, but the woman before Kristen Linklater was a woman by the name of Iris Warren. I mean, it was a voice program that included the entire actor. It wasn't just a technical thing about elocution or projection. It was that your voice comes from who you are, and it comes from very deep in yourself. And the diaphragm, it's no mistake that the diaphragm is right on top of what the Greeks call the second brain, where there's a great nexus of nerves that connect the entire body. And it was finding my voice in that work, and finding my literal voice and finding my voice. My Andy Robinson voice, the person who I am. That has made all the difference in the world to me. And so it's not so much advice, because advice is interesting, and you listen to advice and you nod and it strikes a chord, and maybe it will make a difference. But for me, again, it's taking the image and turning it into action, what we spoke about earlier. And the image of the voice being the voice of the person, and not just the mechanical sound that comes out of a person's mouth.
That's fascinating. That's absolutely fascinating. It's something I got to really go away and ponder about now.
Well, it is. It's because it involves the mystery. I mean, as I say to my students, I mean, you know, the acting is the study of the human being, and there's nothing more mysterious in this world than a human being. Why do we do the things that we do? Where do we come from? What do we want? What are our desires? Where are we heading towards? And the biggest, you know, the biggest question I have for young people who want to be actors: why do you want to be an actor? What is it about you that you want to give people permission to see you? Because to be an actor, you have to give people permission to see you. You don't go in front of a camera or on a stage to hide. If you do, that's kind of absurd. You go to show something. And what is it that you want to show about yourself, other than your vanity? Because, you know, a lot of us, you know, we have all kinds of reasons for becoming actors when we're young, and a lot of it is tied up with our vanity, or it's tied up with our fantasies and so forth. But then those of us who stick around long enough and then get into the act of it, the art of it, the pedagogy of it, then we begin to understand, oh, there are obviously deeper reasons here that we become actors. And there's also a really good reason why it is not just a craft, it is an art. And what is the art of it? And why is it? And what is it about the art of it that compels people to watch? and to relate to actors. And I don't know how I got started on this.
It's good.
What is this?
This is enlightenment.
I'm sorry. I gotta stop drinking this water. There's something in my water.
Whatever it is, it's wonderful stuff. Trust me, because I think picking up on all, it's about. I've started making short films and in writing short stories and so on. It's when as you say, it's being vulnerable. Actually, this is, I think,
absolutely.
People talk about prima
and the paradox is our vulnerability is our strength. That is one of the great paradoxes. That to try and protect yourself and to be strong and to project the strong thing. I mean, that's one of the things that's wrong about American television, American commercial television, is that you got all these guys who are trying to be, heroic and tough, and all these women who are trying to match what the men are doing, and whereas the best stuff is like when you're watching vulnerable human beings, in moments of high dudgeon and great drama. How did they get through this? And then we relate to that.
Yeah,
I can't relate. I mean, as much as I love, for instance, Black Panther that's out. I think I really want to see Black Panther. But and the Marvel stuff. It's great stuff. It really is. It's really creative stuff. But I can't relate to. I can't relate anymore to that. So and so it's like somebody again watching Daniel Day-Lewis in The Phantom Thread. Or this the Shape of Water, to watch Sally Hawkins, who just blows my mind. I mean, this woman. I mean, that kind of openness, and it just kills me.
Yeah. Brilliant. Absolutely. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you so much. This has been, as I say, enlightening. Really, really fascinating. We are at the end of the show. Just before we say goodbye, I'd just like to give a quick shout out to somebody I forgot to give a shout out to at the beginning of the show, and that is that on the 10th of March, I'm going to be attending a screening of Hellraiser in the 35mm print, one of the original, which is over 30 years old. It's amazing how well they've survived. Because I've seen the screening recently, but on 10th of March, down at the Shelley Theatre. So I get to go down and visit the grave of Mary Shelley in her 200th year of the publication of Frankenstein.
Oh, I wish I could do that.
Yeah. It's I'm going to be really looking forward to seeing that. So the details are on my website. Please check that out. And if you're in that part of the world, come along and say hi. Next week, I'm going to be chatting with a gentleman called Stephen Cognetti, who has written and directed a film called Hell House LLC. So we're going to be talking about that next week. But Andrew, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure. Really. Thank you, Nick. It was a delight.
Good. All right, folks. Well, I shall hopefully see some of you next week when I'm talking with Stephen. In the meantime, please take care of yourselves and stay safe. And